Benvinguts, benvingudes a un nou seminari del Cicle OEIAC sobre la intel·ligència artificial a la nostra vida quotidiana, després de la bona acollida de l'anterior seminari sobre ètica per a robots que ens cuiden a càrrec de la Núria Vallès i en Miquel Domènech. Avui continuem amb el cicle, amb aquest darrer seminari del Cicle OEIAC, titulat Artificial Intelligence for Assessment, a càrrec de la professora Petra Ahrweiler. La professora Petra Ahrweiler, com veureu a continuació, és professora catedràtica de Sociologia de la Tecnologia i Innovació i de Simulació Social a la Universitat Johannes Gutenberg de Mainz. Direm en primer lloc algunes coses sobre el seu background i després li donaré la paraula perquè pugui explicar-nos amb més detalls aquest projecte que s'anomena Artificial Intelligence. Welcome, Professor Dr. Petra Ahrweiler. She's a guest for this week here at the University of Girona. And I will say a few things about Petra Ahrweiler. She's been a full professor of technology and innovation and management at the Michael Murphy School of Business at the University of College Dublin before joining the University of Mainz. And while she was at the University College Dublin, she was director of its Innovation Research Unit. She's also been a research fellow of engineering and systems of the division at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology at the MIT. And she is currently the president of the European Social Simulation Association. Professor Dr. Petra Ahrweiler, she started her professional career studying social sciences at the University of Hamburg in Germany. And then at the Free University of Berlin, also in Germany, and she received her PhD for a study on artificial intelligence and got her habilitation at the University of Bielefeld, also in Germany, for a study on simulation in science and technology studies. Petra has a long experience in coordinating and completing international projects and published interdisciplinary in various international journals. She has also been awarded with fellowships of various scientific societies, such as the German Academy of Technical Sciences, Acadec, or Academia.net, as well as the Network of Excellent Female Scientists in Germany. Her research interests include the mutual relationship of new technologies and society, and inter-organizational innovation networks, as well as Asian-based models. Welcome, Petra. Thank you very much for contributing to the OEIAC seminar series. It's a great honor to have you here with us. And before we give Petra the floor, please remember that you can ask questions throughout the YouTube chat. And without any more delay, Petra, we are very happy to have you here today. So I'm going to pass you on the screen, and you can start with me whenever you like.
Thank you for your kind introduction, Albert. I'm very happy to be here and very honored to now give a presentation. I hope you can already see my screen.
Yes.
You can. That's very good. So thank you. And I would like to talk to you about artificial intelligence for assessment. This time, artificial intelligence, AI, has been a topic, as you have heard from Albert, since my PhD. And in between, we had an AI winter, but now it is AI summer, regardless of the weather outside. Again, AI is very, very fashionable these days and used for a lot of applications. And I would like to talk to you today about specific applications where AI is assessing people, especially in the area of public social services. I would like to talk to you about. It is the case that in more and more countries, policymakers use AI to decide on public service provisions and state benefits. And for this, AI is used more and more to create profiles of citizens concerning present and expected future behaviors and performance. And these profiles then are assessed and evaluated and scored by AI machines for decision making, for automatic decision making. This applies, for example, to assigning retirement or unemployment benefits or public health insurance issues. So what is very interesting here is that AI decides on public social services and no longer agency professionals, public administrators in the social services. This is happening each and everywhere nowadays. So, for example, here's just a kind of arbitrary initial collection of examples. In the Netherlands, you have a system called SIRI, short for System Risk Identification. In France, you have a system that uses statistics for monitoring French welfare benefit recipients. These systems mainly detect fraud in social service provision, especially in the area of unemployment benefits, and sort recipients into risk groups for future fraud. Of course, future is always a critical issue. You have to decide on profiles of future fraud, not on fraud that actually happens now or has happened. In Belgium, you have systems that assess search behaviors of unemployed people on websites of job agencies. In Austria, Poland, and Estonia, you have systems like that. They score with machine learning techniques unemployed people into groups. For example, in Estonia, into 3 groups. People that are close to the job market, they will get no support because they will be immediately expected to be back on the job. The second group is the employable group. They will receive training programs and professional development. And the third group are the so-called unemployables, and they will get financial benefits, but no training, because the system classifies as not really worthwhile investing in them. So these decisions, as you can see, they have far-reaching consequences for the concerned individuals. In the US, there are algorithms detecting child abuse, or at least prognosing child abuse, scoring risk cases, where then social workers will appear on your doorstep because your score is high as a household, that something bad will happen, and these social workers will offer some kind of support before anything happens. So these systems work, as you can imagine, with data. And this data might be highly sensitive. It will be household data, it will be health data, it will be data on criminal records, and so on. You need a lot of data to do this type of evaluation and scoring. You need databases that will be connected. You need databases on all individuals of interest. So actually on your whole citizenship in a country. So the question always is, for this type of decision making, how good is that data that you have? Even if it is very complete data, it will be always past data. So data on records, on histories, and on these past data, training will be performed by the algorithms to create these profiles. And of course, if the data then shows that mostly females in their 50s with a history as part-time employees due to family break are difficult to bring back into the job market when they fall unemployed, then the score of such like people will be high to fall into the third group of unemployables, not getting any training. So think of your own profile, your own score, and a machine making such important decisions due to this score, maybe not giving you the job training that would help you and work out in your specific individual case. So a lot of bias and discrimination And of course, just statistical evidence will be transported into the future and prevent any change and cement from training data the status quo that can be found in the database due to this profiling, scoring, and decision making. There is a lot of resistance against this sort of profiling, scoring, and decision making. So, for example, here you can see two examples. One from Amazon. They ditched their recruiting tool that favored men for technical jobs because that was in the database and used for the training data. And of course, you might have heard about the use of these algorithms for policing, that these systems create a lot of bias and discrimination against certain population groups. And in the US, there was a lot of resistance against using these systems for scoring individuals, for example, for recidivism. So how good is the data is one question, and the second question is, of course, can a machine do social justice in the case of social service provision? Because social service provision distinguishes always, and whether it is done by humans or by a machine, it will distinguish between legal recipients and fraudulent recipients, deserving recipients, non-deserving ones, needy ones, non-needy ones, high-performing, low-performing, acceptable, not acceptable. These decisions will be made, and they are binary codes, and they will decide whether you will receive something or not. What is considered to be legal or deserving or needy or anything like that is depending on the social value base of a society. What is considered as acceptable or high-performing or desirable behavior in the future is depending on the value base of a society. Delegating such decisions based on value judgments to machines raises a lot of ethical, philosophical, and social issues and leads to important questions of responsibility, accountability, transparency, and quality of social decision-making about the distribution of scarce resources. And that's what we are talking about here. Yeah, so the state benefits certain people and rejects these benefits to others based to value decisions. And once you delegate these important value judgments to a machine, this raises a lot of questions. Very often, public opinion and discourse in these areas is highly emotional and emphatic. Societal core values are affected and at stake. So this whole area and values needs to be considered when we talk about AI-based social assessment. Another question appears in this context. Is there a one-fits-all approach? Because values are not the same everywhere. They are heavily context-bound. What is seen as social justice largely depends on cultural context. So what is considered as fair in one culture might be considered as severe discrimination practice in another. For example, in my country, in Germany, it is perfectly considered as fair that people with the age of 60 up to 65 will not be favored to return to the job market, because people think they can expect a good pension, and young people should get a fair chance to the job market. So not focusing on this age group in terms of unemployment benefits and getting them back into the job is considered as okay. In other contexts, in other cultures, this would be seen as heavy age discrimination. So what one cultural context considers as fair might be considered as completely unfair in a different. This concerns the values connected to social service provision, but also the fact of AI use for this type of decision making is context bound. Here also perceptions, attitudes, and discussions vary a lot, whether a cultural background considers AI use as okay, a machine doing these decisions, or considers this as a heavy breach because only humans should do and perform value decisions. It depends very much where you are, in which type of society, whether AI use is considered as okay. So attitudes vary a lot, and they not only vary between countries, but also within countries, between societal groups, because you have always winners and losers of the current practices and the current technology providing it. And of course, attitudes will vary a lot whether you are a winner or a loser. So the question of fairness and the question of acceptance of AI use varies from context to context, and therefore, if we look at AI, we need to look at context as well. Thing is that this is not just an expert discourse. This AI-based social assessment for social service provision actually concerns everybody, because everybody is somehow subject to a national welfare system. Even if you get nothing, you will be very concerned about the practices in this national welfare system. The more so you will be concerned with it. It is all about what you get from the state. Whether you are a recipient or a non-recipient, actually, nearly everybody is a recipient sooner or later, because social services come from the cradle to the grave. Whether you are a taxpayer or somebody who has been refused state services, everybody is in a role to be highly concerned about social justice in the distribution system. And therefore, the question whether AI makes things worse or better is of potential interest to everybody. This makes this topic an issue of public interest. This is not only important for, let's say, science communication, that everybody should know about it. It is an issue who can change things. Yeah, so if everybody is concerned and has an own perspective and an insider perspective on these issues, the question pops up: who can improve current systems if not everybody is helping with it? So if we want to improve issues around bias and discriminations, trying to make AI systems more fair, we need to employ a participatory approach, because all these perspectives, the winners and the losers and the experts and the non-experts, the public interest, they are important to develop better AI. If you want to develop AI in relation to cultural context, closing the gap between technology production and dynamic societal value propositions of different cultural contexts, you need participation. It's very important that this is not a static issue, you know, so a societal value base is not a thing which is there and then you adapt to it with your technology and then you're done. This is a dynamic issue and it is developing, evolving, so to speak. The societal discourse about values is moving the thing forward. This is social evolution, and technology needs to keep pace with that and need to be adapted. So what you need actually is not only participatory AI, but dynamic AI. This means you have to develop better AI in co-design. Firstly, with all societal interest groups that are stakeholding with their expertise. So this means the interdisciplinary expert perspectives of, let's say, computer science, social science, economics, psychology, and so on, but also transdisciplinary expert perspectives, because industry will have stakes here, and NGOs and health agencies, religion, arts, policy, they will all have expert stakes in technology production, and they need to be involved with their perspectives. Here we have an even more critical issue at hand, because we want to improve what might be now full of bias and discrimination. And for identifying the flaws in the current system, the inclusion of minorities, vulnerable populations, people at the edge of society, people with no voice in standard representational committees is very important. They will probably be the ones that mostly suffer from current practices, and they will be the ones who have the best access and view to what is really in the moment full of flaws and bias and discrimination. Where are the critical issues? So involve them is a real challenge if you want to develop AI in co-design. So this is now what the project AI4A is doing. AI4A stands short for Artificial Intelligence for Assessment, and it is a project funded by the German Volkswagen Foundation, running from this year until the year 2024. You can have a closer look at the project on the webpage that is mentioned on this page, and I would like to tell you a little bit about the AI4A project and how the project tries to deal with the issues I just mentioned. So AI4A's research questions are divided into two groups. The first group is empirical. Yeah, so it looks at societies before and after AI implementation in the area of public social service distribution. The first question, how were social assessment routines for distributing social services organized and institutionalized in different international societies prior to any AI use? It has always been done, and it was done by humans, these decisions. And our question here is, which societal norms and values were used as reference for these social assessment routines prior to any AI use, and which policies or institutional infrastructures supported these context-specific social assessment practices? So we look at the situation before AI, at the policies, at the norms and values that guided the social assessment for public social service distribution. First question. The second is also empirical, and we look now at the situation after the introduction of AI. In the AI4A project, to be honest, it does not need to be really high-flying AI. It can be data analytics. It can be all types of statistical modeling. We look at technology-based social service provision because not every country is on the high-tech end of AI, but at the end of it is automatic decision-making by AI algorithms. The question is, how and to what degree have conventional social assessment processes in different international societies been replaced or changed by AI? So what is now the difference? Where do non-AI and AI processes differ, especially with regard to implemented social assessment values? And how do societal stakeholders, policy, public discourse, and institutional infrastructures respond? I told you in these examples, sometimes there's a huge uproar and AI is accused as unfair and biased and is even discarded after a while and banned. So what is exactly happening here? What is the situation after the introduction of AI in international societies? That is the first set of questions, and it can only be answered empirically by going into these societies and just looking at things and researching this. The second set of research questions in AI fora is about the future, and this concerns modeling and simulation. So we look at the existing system in research question 1 and 2, past and existing, and now we want to know, and what would be the desired societal scenario of the future in these international societies, looking at societal discourse, what they claim is wrong with the current practices, and how to go there. Because the AI Fora project does not stop in just describing and diagnosing problems. We want to see what do these societies imagine as their desired futures in terms of their value base, and what would be the corresponding AI technology that would support this desired scenario. The question now in this area is, how will AI change public service provision and its underlying societal value system in future? And how context and path dependent are these changes? So one fits all approach. And what will be the likely effects and impacts for living conditions and well-being in international societies? So basically the question, where will we end up in our societies using more and more AI? Second question in this part is, which policies, behavioral changes, and institutional developments are necessary and appropriate to prevent or support certain scenarios? Of course, there are worst-case scenarios, and they need to be prevented. And there are desired scenarios, and we want to support them with policies. We need policy modeling to look at how best support desired scenarios. And the last question then is, and how would the AI systems actually look like in terms of technology that correspond to the desired scenarios? How can better, this more responsible AI technology look like that engages with societal norms and values of stakeholders, and that is dynamic and responding to societal discourse? So these are the 5 research questions of AI Fora to be answered in the course of the 3 years project. What are the international societies we look at? We use a specific framework because what we want to look at is the cultural dependency of AI use and social service provision practices, and of course both connected. The framework we use is the framework that is called the Ingelhard-Welzel Cultural Map, coming from the World Values Survey. You see here an internet address where you can look this up. It is basically a huge indicator set that is run in all cultural contexts in all countries worldwide. That has been developed by political scientists and runs with huge questionnaires asking for value dispositions and cluster countries in certain value clusters. They have these indicator set is evaluated against certain dimensions or variables. You see here a coordinate system that has 2 dimensions. The one On the y-axis is traditional versus secular rational values. So if you are very much at the bottom here, you have a traditional value set, a society with traditional value sets. And if you're high up here, you are in a country with a secular rational value set. And on the x-axis, you have
Petra, you have disabled you have muted yourself.
Oh,
okay, now.
Can you hear me again? No.
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Yeah, so I was just the x-axis.
Yeah.
There you have survival versus self-expression values. That means if you're very far on the left side of things, you are in a society that just looks for economic survival. So your day-to-day problem is how you will get your meals and your housing and simple survival. And if you are very far on the right side on this axis, you are in a country you want to have all kinds of higher needs and to be fulfilled. And now you can see in this wave 7, which run from 2017 to 2021, with the questionnaires and with the indicator set, how the culture clusters were composed. And they have names, these clusters, and you see countries in these clusters. Our aspiration in AI Fora, looking at AI use for social service provision and its cultural dependency, was to have one country at least in each of the clusters of the Ingelhard-Welzel cultural map. What happens in the interdisciplinary case studies in AI Fora? We have teams in each country consisting of social science and of computer science. And you can see here 6 case study teams. And if you look down the Spanish one, you can see Albert, who is one of our case study partners in the AI Fora case study set. So what are these team members doing? The social science or cultural science partners, they investigate the cultural and social ethical axiom base of value and belief systems in their society, underlying the social assessment for public welfare provision. So they will look at sociological dynamics of actors and networks, adapting to cultural dimensions of the research realm. That is what social science will do, investigating the first 2 empirical questions of AI Fora, the social sciences. And they will use, of course, their local context for analysis and relate their findings to the national welfare systems where they seem fit and appropriate. You see, we have China, Estonia, Germany, India, Spain, and the US in the original sample, and an additional sample we could add to the AI Fora, and that is Iran, Ukraine, Nigeria, Mexico, and Italy. That is the social science partners, and they are complemented by computer scientists in their countries. And these computer scientists, they investigate the technical base of implementation of AI in the social service provision system. And they will look at the characteristics of the algorithms in use at the research direction and agenda setting in terms of data analytics and programs. As I said, in some countries, it's just data analytics or statistical modeling. In others, it is much more. And these teams in each case study country, social science and computer science, they cooperate on these scenarios for better AI. These are the scientists in AI Fora. But the scientists are not the only partners in the case studies of AI Fora. We also have transdisciplinary partners. And in this case, it is not only industry and NGO and media and so on. They will be included, and they are included through the actor networks reconstructed by the social scientists. Here we have another partner type. We have brokers in the AI Fora project, because as I said, it is very important to include the losers of the current practices and systems. We need to include heterogeneous stakeholders from all kinds of backgrounds who need voice to communicate on eye level without being pre-configured and constrained by the environment. You can imagine if we as academics come and ask people to tell us their opinion, there could be certain reverberations like, I'm not an academic, I don't speak your language, I cannot tell you, and I would need to speak like an academic to explain to you. So people would feel pre-configured by this environment. And the same applies to industry. People would say, I'm not rich, I cannot talk to you guys that are high up in industry. Or policy agencies, I'm a loser of your system, I cannot talk to you. So the environment would be very, very important to involve these vulnerable populations and minorities and help them to speak on eye level. And the main risk of the AI Fora project is actually failure to do so, failure to successfully engage local stakeholders. If that happens, half of the project would be a miss. And therefore, we need participative formats and venues that are neutral and not representing one involved actor's interest, and be open to everybody, regardless of background. We call these places safe spaces, and these are neutral but supportive places of nonviolent communication where equal opportunities for speaking up and for participatory decision-making are provided. These safe places, you can call them like network laboratories for innovating societies that want to include all types of stakeholders. In our project, they are so-called intermediaries, network organizations specialized in intercultural and intersocietal communication, and they play the role of bridges and brokers and networks, boundary objects, if you are sociologists, or communication disks. And these places, they are used to face a plurality of perspectives and intercultural context diversity. Furthermore, our brokers, they have methodological resources to deal with joint problem definition and problem solution where there is a high degree of differentiation. So often these places have experience in nonviolent communication methods, low-tech consultation methods, participatory multi-stakeholder workshops, and so on. In our Spanish case study, Montserrat Abbey is the safe space that is serving as this intermediary. And we have these organizations all over in all 11 case studies. So what's actually done in the case studies? I brought you two examples to give a little bit more feeling of the research and the research methods used in the case studies. Here is the example of the US case. the computer scientists in the US case study of AI4, they analyzed the AI use in the US public sector, the systems and algorithms and models in place in the area of unemployment benefits provided by the state. And the social scientists from Rand Corporation in the US, they have just finished already a survey questionnaire on AI use in distribution of unemployment benefits. So they rolled out a big quantitative survey, and they collected information on satisfaction with decision about unemployment benefits with and without AI, and the willingness of people to challenge decisions. So if they ask questions like, a machine has made the decision that you won't receive any unemployment benefits due to these and that criteria, how likely is it that you will challenge this decision because it was made by a machine? And how likely would it that you challenge this decision if it was made by a human? So this type of question is in this questionnaire, and they rolled it out in American citizenship and got a lot of information about the satisfaction of decision-making with or without AI. And of course, they asked people about their demographics, so age, gender, geographical location, and so on. And you can see what type of population group answers this satisfaction and happiness with AI use in public service provision in what way. So the social scientists are quite happy with the results of the survey, but what was missing, and this is now what they are interested in AI4 for, is the question, and what is the role of cultural background? The US society has a huge variety of cultural, religious background, and of course the value base in American society is hugely diverse. And the question was, for our social science partners was, what kind of cultural background is related to what type of response behavior, answer behavior in the questionnaire. And this was not in the original questionnaire. And that is now what happens in the intermediary location in the US. There we will, AI4 will run so-called gamification workshops, where the setting of the questionnaire for generating information will be used in a kind of game setting. So people will actually run through the situation of applying and receiving or not receiving unemployment benefits, being in a role, and they will be run through the situation that was asked in the questionnaire in a game setting. And they will come from certain cultural backgrounds, and in the game, they will respond to the situation and to the decision making according to their cultural background. And this information then can be added to the results of the questionnaire. So this is a specific interest of our US case study partner from Sociology, to get this cultural perspective, which is important for the US. And what they are really interested in is to see what this would look like in other countries, like in Nigeria, in Mexico, in China, in India, in Germany, in Spain. So if you would run the questionnaire in each of these other case study countries, how would people respond? That would give you a nice cultural comparison. However, it is not very likely that this American questionnaire will be run now in all these countries. But what we can do in AI4 is run the gamification workshop in all countries, because that is relatively easy done. And therefore, with the help of the coordination of the team from Mainz, you can really gather information like with the questionnaire, with these gamification workshops in all 11 AI4 case study countries. Second example I want to show you is the German case. The computer scientists in the German case study, they analyzed the AI use in the German public sector, what's in place there in terms of algorithms and systems. And the area we will look at is the area of refugees and migrant policies. So in fact, refugees and migrant policies and social services are very interesting because you have a very, very huge issue whether a refugee is accepted in a country which is at the borders, and whether asylum is granted. This decision is made by AI machines, and you have all these small little decisions once they are in the country, whether they will receive anything like kindergarten places or money for supporting housing and so on and so on. So all types of social services. This is a second level. In Germany, you have the federal structure, you have the state level, you have the federal states, and AI is used in all of this decision making on recipients in terms of refugee policies. The social scientists in the German case study will look at the social side of things using a mixed method approach. So we will have a quantitative approach with a social network analysis. We will look at all the actors involved concerning granting asylum or other public social services, both for the general state level and then specifically for the federal state of Schleswig-Holstein. And we will research both contexts as social scientists using social network analysis as the method, which is more quantitative. And we will complement this type of research by qualitative social research, doing interviews with actors and stakeholders concerning their experience with the current system, with and without AI, and the satisfaction with the current system and practices, and of course the desired ones. This will be display of probably a huge variety between the winners and the losers of the current practices. The role of the intermediary in the setting, computer science, social science, in the German case, is again running gamification workshops for generating information related to cultural background and the value base behind attitudes concerning AI use. So we will use gamification workshops in Germany to discover the flaws and the biases and the discriminatory practices in the current system, and actually work with the vulnerable groups and minorities and those who had been rejected social services in the current practices. Yeah, so the last thing I want to tell you a little bit more about are these famous gamification workshops, because you might know all other methodologies I talked about, but you might not be so very familiar with the gamification workshops. What are they? They belong to the qualitative social research realm, and there are certain aspirations connected to them. So where we apply them is we look at a problem context we are all exposed to. And of course, as I said, social service provision is a brilliant example for such a problem context. This problem context is important because we need a situation where we are faced with all kinds of requirements of decisions, value-based decisions. And the decision-making, as I said, is related to cultural background, and we want to get at this cultural background, and we will, in a way, confront people with this problem context and the decision-making and their cultural habitus to deal with this decision-making. That's not that we expect that all Germans will behave the same way, or all Spanish people share the same values and will do the same thing faced with decision situations in a certain problem context. Of course, there's a huge variety of all kinds of behaviors in a culture. You can either support the current norms and value set, you can think it's a good thing, I'm highly committed to the norms and values in my culture, or you can defecting them. You can be a criminal, you can run against. However, it is like with this famous novel by Peter Hook, Smiller's Sense of Snow, which you might know, it was set as a movie in 1997 as well. Scandinavians have much more different notions for snow than we have due to their snow experience. The society around you in which you live and what makes your experience background let you see things. People from other societal backgrounds might not see them because they are meaningless for them. You and your society mates might differ in everything: attitudes, perceptions, worldviews, whether you like snow or hate snow or whatever, but you share meaningfulness. You share that you see these objects. The type of object formation is related to culture background, to your experience set in your society, and everybody has it. Everybody has it regardless whether you are against or promoting it. It is the meaning that is important, the footprint of society that can be found in all society members sharing a certain cultural background, and that is what we are after in these gamification workshops. So here you see nice pictures from the last gamification workshop from Germany. So that's how it looks like when people are at a gamification workshop. Yeah, looks quite peaceful. I said it comes from qualitative social science, but gamification workshops actually have a quantitative edge to them because quantitative data is generated by gamification workshops. So to give you an example, what could be such a game? For example, take the pandemics. Of course, there are rules and regulations where it is pretty clear what to do because you have to follow. However, there are still many small decisions we have to make individually. So, for example, will I go to work or will I take the chance of some leisure time? That was a situation in the past month. Will I invest in a public vaccination campaign or buy some shares of a promising company? Will I buy a costly Corona Warn app or other digital devices for pandemics control? Or will I use my money for something else? Will I vote for more expensive taxes to afford basic health insurance for everybody or against? Will I go to school to improve my work performance or just try my chance? Will I get involved in basic democracy for pandemics governance or rather not? Things like that. So there are a lot of decisions to take, and a serious game, as it is called, will implement such a problem context as a game with anonymous players that just share a certain cultural background. And there will be stations where players make decisions like work, office, a bank, a supermarket, things like that will be stations where you will be confronted with these questions I just named, and where you will make a decision. And this decision will be recorded in a quantitative database. The issue behind it is that these stations will be value coded, capturing the conflicting value propositions behind the decisions. Because of course, if you decide to buy shares and not invest into the vaccination campaign, you make a certain value decision, and it is a kind of conflicting value proposition behind it. So the stations will record these decisions, and also there will be somebody at these stations record conversations and discussions of players and observe any qualitative data connected to behaviors. The value coding now of stations and the value decisions of players are not provided by us. Yeah, so it is not superimposed. This is the value conflict you are in, and this is the value coding of the station, but the value coding of the stations will be collected by a value survey following the survey of the Engelhardt-Welzel questionnaire like that, and it will be run among the players of a serious game where you then have the value coding of the stations emerging from the answers to the value survey of the players. So each society, each group can value code their own stations for decision making. Further checks are run here, interviews with the players and the qualitative data collected by the chairs of the station to see that it is really an emerging value interpretation set that is connected to the decision making of the players. Yeah, this is my last material slide, so to speak. There is a lot of advantage of these gamification workshops. I already told you how they are used in the case studies. These games can be played in all cultural contexts, yeah, like the pandemic's game everybody has experienced now, and all these behaviors were displayed all over the globe. So you can play it in all cultural contexts, and it will make a difference where it is played. Yeah, so it will make a difference whether you play that in India or play that in Spain or in Germany. It can be played by everybody. So you do not need to be an expert in anything. You just need to do what you're doing in your everyday life. And you can play it regardless of group membership or expertise or background or personal attributes. Everybody can play it, and the cultural footprint of your society will be in everybody present. There will be a huge variety of behaviors related to what is the actual group you're playing with. So a student group will play differently from some group of professionals, maybe. There will be a huge variety, but as I said, this cultural footprint of meaningfulness and of own value coding will be different from whether you play it in a completely different cultural background. What group size is good for these workshops? Our experience, we have done this before in various contexts, is that a medium group size of 20 to 30 people is pretty good. A group size less than that would not display interesting commonalities. Yeah, if you play that with 3 or 4, you would not see patterns. And if you go high up in numbers, then you could rather run a statistical analysis than use this quite sophisticated approach. Yeah, so what you see is, though each player will certainly have his or her individual decision choice, you will see that the game will display the context-bound societal value sets through the corridor choices checked by the qualitative interpretations of the cultural specific value coding. These games create a controlled setting where you can observe things, measure things, record data, and compare it to other such like settings and other cultural backgrounds. Yeah, this is my last slide now. We are looking for 3 years of exciting research. You see here all the case studies, and you see timelines here. The W is always a gamification workshop run in all these countries, doing all this type of research at the site of quantitative and qualitative social research, of social simulation to create desired societal scenarios, and of computer science implementing better AI systems using this participatory, dynamic, emancipatory AI approach we are following with the AI4A project. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Petra, for all this information about the April project. It's a fascinating project that covers a great deal in terms of research questions, but also in terms of scope. The geographical scope is impressive, and there are so many members, and certainly the context here, and project generally, but in this particular one, context really matters. While we wait for perhaps some questions from the audience, I was going to ask you perhaps one thing that maybe some of the individuals following the presentation might think about. So what shall we do with all this information after we gather information from individuals and from each gamification projects? How are we thinking, or what is going to happen with all this information, and how are we going to make these AI systems better, particularly for social service provision? So what is going to happen after that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. There will be a huge knowledge repository where all the insights, the data, and the results coming from these case studies will be checked in and be evaluated. What we hope for is an answer to the question, how context bound do we need the AI systems to be? Because in the moment, there's a huge discourse about global AI ethics that tries to consider many things on a high level, abstract level, and provide guidelines how to build these systems. If it's really true that better AI systems would respond very closely to societal norms and value sets, to belief systems of societies, to cultural contexts, we would not just need one global AI, but we would need many specific solutions to context-specific problems. And our suspicion, actually our research hypothesis, is that this is the case. And from data and from results from our case study, we hope for evidence to support this and for guidelines and directions how to move things forward. The good thing is that the technology providers and policymakers are part of our project. So it is not just getting information from societal stakeholders suffering or benefiting from decisions, but to get the makers and experts and promoters of these systems into the dialogue for really making a change. And the good thing is mostly they are really interested and would like to improve their systems. Yeah, because you can see very clearly what happens when systems are not appropriate for societal value discourse, then whole societies simply opt out of technology development, and there are no gains for anybody.
That's very critical element for designing AI systems that really take into account the context and they move forward with values. But that seems to me, that seems that it is kind of applicable. You can implement this sort of solutions when it comes to the welfare state, or how you basically maintain and improve the welfare state by including AI systems. But what about what is happening outside the welfare state? Can you actually apply this methodology in the private sector as well? Or is it happening already to a certain extent?
Yeah, actually, in this whole area of social service provision, you can see a lot of dynamic. actually sometimes even a move back, but also a kind of diversification by who are the actors providing social services. So for us, it is quite natural that this is done by the state. Yeah, so that there is public social service distribution we are talking about. But if you look at who provides social services, there are a lot of new actors coming into the game in many, many countries. These are private actors, these are companies, these are NGOs, these are charities to a great deal, who try to figure out a new way to cater for the social good, to recreate welfare systems. This has a lot to do with the pressure on public welfare systems and with scarce resources. So the pressure to move to new actors also come from the old system, so to speak. And there's a lot of diversification going on. But that does not mean that there's a lot of diversification of what is going wrong. Yeah, so the problems of the system will be inherited by the new actors, if not solutions for things like biases and discriminations are found. And of course, then solutions developed in the AR4A project for public social service provision will also apply to private social service provision or charity-based social service provision whatsoever, to new actors and networks and technology used to provide social welfare to everybody.
That's absolutely great. And even though I know some of the things that are happening already in the project, but for people who don't know very much about the project or are kind of discovering a bit more through either a previous presentation from you or from today's presentation, could you tell us more about some of the innovative aspects of this project? You obviously talked about gamification as a very important part of gathering information, but also things that have to do with values at the individual level, but for group level in different contexts. And you said something about these intermediate partners or the intermediaries that also play a role. Why do you think is so important? And here, one might think about the importance of, especially if people have lived long enough to see the role of different agents in society or basically individuals, but also associations that give voice to the most vulnerable populations in particular. Might think about the importance of designing systems that to some extent incorporate those views, but also the values from the most vulnerable. Could you tell us more about these intermediates? Why do we have intermediates in this project?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that we very often underestimate how deeply rooted culture is in our daily social practices. We can sometimes see it if we look at faraway cultures, but very often not when we look at our own culture, which is a kind of blindness against the own behavior set. So for example, if you look at India, I said before, one of our case study countries, their social service provision is organized according to caste membership. And caste membership is deeply wedded to the belief system of this society. India has a constitution coming from the UK, actually, which strongly supports equality in social service provision. But the daily behavior and the social practice in social service provision is deeply wedded to the caste membership system. And it is simply not happening. And the feeling of social justice is not according to the constitution, but according to the caste system. So everything is deeply wedded to the cultural background and to the Weltanschauung and to the ethical value set in the population. And to get at this and to give voice to that is very important if you want to create technologies that are fit for purpose for a specific society. So otherwise you would act as a colonialist, ethnocentric researcher trying to superimpose your own value set, which is cultural bound again, but only to your cultural background, to others. Yeah, so I think to develop a notion of fairness that stems from the different cultural perspectives and backgrounds of world societies, that will give us at least the chance of approaching something like global social justice, because global social justice does not mean one value set superimposed on everybody, but respecting the value sets of other societies and try to find commonalities, differences. And I think you need a lot of brokerage and bridges to do that, and a lot of openness. And usually the usual suspects in terms of institutions involved in research and in technology design, they don't offer this type of openness towards other value systems, other value perspectives, and simply other cultural backgrounds. And this is why we have these intermediaries as a network. They are networked themselves to provide such locations where these discussions can take place. It's one innovative aspect, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Petra. I can check that I'm the only one asking questions here. But one final question, if I may, it has to do with the sort of developing AI legislation in Europe, which used to be kind of risk-based and thinking about putting AI systems in some sort of scale, depending on whether or not they might be harmful to people or less harmful. And so kind of moving away from the present, but going back, to what extent you think the regulation will also provide some sort of framework, at least in Europe, and perhaps for everything that will be exported from Europe to the rest of the world, will provide that kind of framework that makes people think about the use and implementation of AI systems in a way that is closer, at least not for the short term, but for the long term, it is closer to this idea that we need to think about our values, especially perhaps we should think about not putting them in sort of a risk-based scale, but in a sort of more how we use AI systems that are more adaptable to or used in a way that are more close to our value system, rather than to whether or not we will implement or inflict some harm. Well, in other words, if I can summarize the question, what is the relationship between AI Fora and the coming AI legislation?
Yeah, very interesting question. Usually the law comes in when the baby has been thrown out with the bath already. Yeah, so it is a kind of repair shop remedying then some damage already done. Yeah, you can sue people for bad AI and for bias and discrimination in the aftermath. What would be much better, and where law is not involved, is the co-design of AI technology together with society. Yeah, that is not the job of the law, of course, to show us how to do technology production. Yeah, technology production is like a big social project. It's like an ambitious social project where everybody is concerned and involved. And among others, of course, legal aspects play an important role in technology production, but it is not the law giving us the guidelines how to do better technology. Yeah, so this is something that needs to stem from a network of co-designing stakeholders, where law is just one of the many. Very often you have the legal realm on a very high level thing. So in the moment, there are a lot of committees trying to develop AI guidelines, AI law, AI regulations, but this does not break down to the grassroots level. So in a concrete situation, it does not mean anything that AI may not discriminate certain population groups. Yeah, so it does not break down into a concrete action set what to do. Yeah, and it is this big gap between the axiom base, how AI should be, and the concrete statements, the facts on the ground level, where this big action base applies. It's like always with the law, yeah, you have the axioms and then you deduce in a very complicated deductive manner the application on the grassroots level, but that's not straightforward, and law will never be able to really organize our daily life and our social practice. Never has been.
Completely agree. Thank you very much, Petra, for your presentation. It's a great honor to have you on the seminar series of the Sociology for Ethics in Artificial Intelligence. Recordeu que aquest és el darrer seminari del cicle OEIAC. Moltes gràcies a vosaltres per la vostra assistència en tot aquest recorregut que vam començar el mes de maig. Avui és el darrer. Esperem que no sigui l'últim, i el que sí que us podem assegurar és que hi haurà un acte de cloenda que serà el dia 11 de novembre al Centre Cultural La Mercè de Girona, amb els professors Joan Manuel del Pozo i Ulises Cortés, que ens parlaran sobre la intel·ligència artificial i les seves relacions obscures amb els poders polític i militar. I tothom està convidat a assistir-hi. Només heu de visitar la nostra pàgina web per fer la inscripció i esperem que no us ho perdeu. Thank you so much again, Petra. I de nou, moltes gràcies a vosaltres per la vostra atenció i fins aviat. Adéu.